You know, one thing I'm guilty of is not being festive enough with my guns. So I'm gonna shoot a pumpkin. Welcome back to Gun Tote Minnesotan. Today I have an optic sent out to the channel by Shepherd Optics. This is their BRS 1:8 by 28. I'm going to start off with some of the specifications and then I'll go into actual use and finish off the video with some of my final opinions after using the optic several hundred rounds as a minimum through this on a 223, and then here pictured and in the video you're going to see it on a 300 Blackout. Starting off, the magnification range is 1 to 8 power. The objective aperture is 28 millimeters. The tube diameter is 34 millimeters. Field of view at 100 yards is 105 feet, or 13 feet at max power. Eye relief is 3.4 to 3.8. The click value on my model is 1/10 mil. You can get an MOA version, which is going to be a half MOA click, but mine is 1/10 mil. Total turret travel, this thing has 40 mils of internal travel. It's a little easier to do on an LPVO, but it still impresses me. Parallax is set at 100 yards, which makes the most sense. Illumination has 6 settings and off in between, and it is a locking illumination. Very cool, unique feature there. Battery life, it's going to run off of a CR2032, which is the standard. It's a lithium-ion style battery. The material is aircraft grade aluminum. The finish color is black, or like a matte black. The finishing type is type 3 hard anodizing. The water resistant capability is going to be about 3 meters. And the type of gas they use to charge this optic and keep it from fogging up is nitrogen. The weight is 24.8 ounces and the length is only 11 inches. Pretty well situated for a 1:8. Now I'm going to just move over to some of the shooting, and you saw me just a second ago in the video using my phone camera kind of attached to a mount. I want to say thank you to Scope Cam for providing that for me. I actually had a failure of my camera that I usually use to record. It fell in the wind and smashed, and so it was really nice to be able to have something to provide some backup footage for this video today. So again, that was Scope Cam. Thanks for sending that out to the channel and helping me get this one done. All right, let's do a little bit, 330 yards on 1 power, and then I'll just kind of move it up through the range as I'm taking shots. I don't think it's practical to use 1 power at 300 yards, but it's definitely doable. I'll tell you that, guys, definitely doable. And if you didn't have time to move it up to 8 power, I think you'd still make your hits okay at this close of a distance. And remember, I'm using 300 Blackout with very much so non-match ammo. I checked my SDs a little bit ago, and they are shamefully bad. My SDs are 47. That's really, really bad. But this was factory second ammo. It's a bad lot, actually. It's safe to shoot, it's just not accurate, and so that's why I'm using it to plink here. But it's still hitting my target pretty decently, and I've been plinking on clays, having fun with it, so I'll keep using it until it's gone. I only have a few more rounds, and then I'm going to switch over to match ammo for the rest of the review, going a little further back. But like I said, starting on 1 power, and then I'll start pushing out to a little more magnification. There's an impact, up to 2 power. That field of view, man, that's so good. This has an excellent field of view. I just want to mention that. There's an impact. Going up to 4 power. I probably should have checked my camera battery level before I left this morning because it didn't plug in all the way, which means it didn't charge all the way, which means it died while I was shooting those groups. Anyways, easy hits from 1 power up to 8 power. At 4 power, I'm going to say the reticle becomes really, really clear as far as holdovers. It's so functional, and the kind of double donut thing that it's got going on, it just draws your eyes to the center of the glass, and I'm really enjoying that feature, whether I'm shooting on 1 power, that 2.5 range to 8 power. I'm finding that field of view is awesome. It's really good. Brightness is awesome. It is pretty bright out right now, so take that with a grain of salt. But when it was low light, like the other night when I was shooting at 8 power, the image just didn't darken significantly as I was magnifying. Didn't have tunneling. I'm finding a lot that I like about this optic, and it is truly replacing some other low power variable optics that I have. 8 power, it's still on the low power side, but it's a little closer to that mid-range in my opinion, and it's doing it really well. All right, 150 grain, just FMJs at 330 yards. These are not match rounds by any means. And for the wind, it's looking like 7 to 10, something like that right now. Not real consistent on direction, but shouldn't push these 150s around too much just yet. All right, that's with the same hold each time. Definitely a dispersion there. It's not an amazing round. The wind might push it around a little bit, but it's still on steel. I'm going to send 4 more just to see how they respond. Well, it seems like they're a little bit low. My data for that was about 4 mils. I'm going to go to 4.5, and I think that'll bring a few of those low ones up there. My standard deviations and my extreme spread obviously are not amazing right now. There's quite a disbursement on that steel. It will change once I use match rounds, but I tend to save the match rounds for 600 yards and beyond. Right now I'm just plinking, having some fun. Let's do 4 more with 4.5 mils. I'm just using holdovers and getting used to that reticle a little more. I was shooting on 1 power, and that was pretty darn small. I'm going to move up to 8 power now and use 4.5 mils so I can more accurately assess what my particular hold is, and I think that will help me. Well, on 8 power, that really makes a difference. Now, I know it's not incredibly practical to shoot on 1 power at 325 yards, but I'm just testing the reticle out. I'm just seeing what is possible, what's practical, and I really like the 1 power on this scope. I'm going to tell you that I can still just barely make out some of that information, but I can also just turn on my illumination up a setting there and see, some contrast on my targets. Especially if it's close up. The 1 power is a pretty true 1 power overall, not too fishbowly or anything like that. Excellent glass so far. I'm very happy with that. I've been looking at that 8 power here. I know I'm only at 325, but I've shot it further, and I'm seeing that the glass looks pretty good. Focusing on holdovers. Again, this does have exposed turrets, and I plan to show you a little bit of dialing with that in just a bit, and I will have to because of the heavy, slow loads that I'm going to use. But so far, the reticle is stellar. I like it. I've mentioned it in a few reviews that I'm just starting to have a little bit of trouble seeing really tiny dots in reticles, and some LPVOs have switched to using a pretty small dot, and I can't do it. When it comes to LPVOs, first focal planes like this, I pretty much prefer a 0.5 size dot, somewhere in that neighborhood. When it gets down to 0.03, my correction there, 0.03, that's pretty small for my eye. Lots of people do it just fine. Plenty of optics use those, but I'm preferring something a little bigger. And this has that cross pattern. And so if you dial, you can hold that cross pattern right on your target, and it's a really nice high contrast. The reticle though, let's even just go to 3 power. On 3 power, I can make out the stadia really well. I can make out some of the windage marks, and it doesn't obscure a huge amount of my target. So I'm pretty happy with this reticle. So far, let's see, at 8 power, I would say 8 power You know, my concern for long range, when you have a first focal plane that has a thicker line or a donut or a semi-donut, half circle, whatever, around your center crosshair is just obscuring the target. That's usually my concern. But I think the proximity and the distance away from the center cross for your reticle, the main point of aim, I think the proximity is far enough away that it really hasn't obscured my target. It hasn't obscured field of view as well. An important part of this circle is that it does have an opening on the bottom, and so that you can see the stadia dropping down. It doesn't interfere with the stadia dropping down there, the mills that go through. And so if I do have an impact that's low, I've been able to pick it out and see a little bit of splash in those lower stadia because that big donut is not completed technically. It just goes right up to it. And so pretty good on 8 power. Seeing my misses, I'm really close. So 325, believe it or not, even on 1 power, you can see your misses just fine. I like this feature. Just going to throw a few random things in here, guys. I like this feature of being able to add on the throw lever assist. And this is a real nice large size one with an aggressive texture. It has an O-ring on there. Everything about it is great. But this is so smooth. This mag ring is so smooth. It's so well done. I just don't need it. And I like the slightly lower profile look on this particular rig. There are some where I would probably want to put it on there, and maybe in winter time I'll change my mind and want that assist on there when I'm wearing gloves. That could be one change. But it's so easy to modify that on the fly. It can be in the same day. If it's cold tonight, which it will be around 30 something degrees, maybe I'll want to put on a pair of gloves and then I want that on there. But today, right now it's 55 out. I don't even need the jacket I'm wearing. And this little pyramid and the design here, it's so smooth and it's big enough that I can grab onto it and go quickly between 1 power and 8 power. There's an appropriate amount of resistance, but not too much. Very well done. I'm liking this optic a lot, guys. If you can't tell, I'm gushing a little bit. It's very good. It's going to replace the 1 to 10 that I had on here. So if you've watched my channel, I liked it. I like 1 to 10. I like what I can do with 1 to 10. But this has some superior aspects to it, not the least of which being the glass. It's crazy how consistent this thing is. This optic is very, very good, and that data's good. The ammo's okay. It's not a match round. I thought it was. It's just a hollow point, but the rifle optic combination is performing very, very good right now. Again, that's 300 Blackout. It's not a 223. That target's too big. All right, so at 600 yards, or I think it was 595, I'm not going to blow anybody's mind with this, but it wasn't too bad with the SIG 125 grain open tip match. That bullet is actually my favorite 300 Blackout bullet by far. It's kind of expensive, but it shoots decently well. In the wind today, I knew I was going to have some lateral variation because of wind. I'm actually really impressed at the elevation. I know I'm not in the green, and here's what the 168s did. Those are not a match round, and they obviously had some standard deviations that were going up and down. But the 125s now, this isn't too bad if you consider that's a 5-inch target. MOA is roughly a little over 6 inches, and this right here, that probably is one MOA, actually, now that I look at it. It's probably one MOA total, but without the windage error, it would be a little tighter, and possibly really tight, possibly around half MOA. So the fallacy that you need really, really high magnification to shoot really tight, you know, it's a fallacy. It's just not necessarily true. It can help, and it does help me sometimes to have more magnification. So here's 2 groups from my 300 PRC. I tried a new load today, a hunting load actually, and that's roughly 2 inches right there for the 4 shots, and then a flyer over there. Bad trigger pull, I'm sure. The ammo is probably just fine, but that's shooting on 36 power. Usually I don't shoot quite that heavy. I don't think it's necessary most of the time. I just wanted to try it, and for fun, that's what I was getting. So roughly 2 inches, and then down here looks like roughly 2 inches and another flyer, but that's on 36 power, and you compare that to shooting a 1-8, and it's a 300 Blackout. It's a slower round. It can't do as much with the wind, and I thought that was actually pretty admirable for that 1-8 to pull out a group like that. The reticle has a lot to do with it. And I stand by that. I think the reticle, what we're staring at, what we're using, the information inside of our scopes is incredibly informative and important to making hits, consistent hits, and the further I go, the longer the distance is between me and the target, the more that reticle really matters to me, as well as the tracking, the glass quality. It all kind of works together. But the reticle, you can do so much with the reticle. Now, the BRS is kind of the premium LPVO that Shepard offers. What you're looking at right now is actually the tier underneath the BRS. This one right here is the Rogue. This is actually the second focal plane version of a 1-8 here. And so with the second focal plane, remember, whether you're on 1 power or 8 power, the reticle is going to stay the same size. It's not going to change as you magnify and go back and forth. But with the BRS, the reticle is going to change in proportion as you go back and forth from 1 power to 8 power. And here's just a demonstration again of a second focal plane. So I'm going down to 1 power. It's improving my field of view, you know, pretty decent field of view on these Shepard optics. That's nice, pretty close to one, you know, a true 1X, and it's not bad. But the downside is that calibration of that reticle, it's only going to match up at 8 power technically. Now at 1 power, it doesn't make a huge difference because I'm shooting things that are close, and I'm not terribly worried about that. But the advantage of having a first focal plane like the BRS, which I'm reviewing today, is that it doesn't matter what power it's on, and when I bring it down to 1 power, I still have, you know, some illumination that I can use, not super bright, but it allows me to center in on that target and the stadia still match up. All right, taking a look at the BRS 1-8 from Shepard. Here's the reticle on 1 power. Again, this is a first focal plane, so if that seems a little small for those holdovers, it is. It's on 1 power right now, and I'm looking at 200 yards there. There's like an 8 and a 10-inch target, and I can actually, with my eye, let me give you an idea what it looks like from my eye. I can actually put that crosshair on there, and it's much more clear than you're going to see through a camera, obviously. So there you go. Let's go a little closer just so you can see. That's what 1 power is going to look like. You know, one thing I'm really happy with is the 1 power seems pretty close to a true 1X. I did not see significant distortion at all, or accidental magnification. I think it's got a really nice image. I'm just so impressed. In fact, the color of what I'm seeing, I'm looking at colors a lot today around the edges. I'm looking at my steel targets, looking at paper, and I'm just so impressed with the color scheme and how everything's popping with this. Just looks really, really nice. So there's one power. There's a target at 50 yards. There's a target at 100 yards. I'm going to go ahead and start bumping up the magnification. Very silky smooth on the mag ring again. There's 1.5 power. There's 2 power. I don't think I'll be using that a lot. I'll probably be going between the extremes, but it is a first focal plane, and the advantage of that is enormous for me because I just don't have to worry about what power I am on, and the reticle. The values of that reticle are going to be the same because it's a first focal plane. So I'll push it up again. Here is 5 power. That's 100 yards that we're looking at, and up to 8. Now you'll notice something. There is a ring, a wider ring there, and that wider ring works really, really well. The next center ring that is closest to the reticle, that works really well. And these compounding rings do a great job of drawing your eye very quickly to the center. And that center cross, I think that's a great way to go, especially for an LPVO like this. Go out to 200. The center dots are good, but they just have to be a little bigger, and they do end up obscuring the target slightly when they're bigger center dots. And I think this is a good way to go because you can still have a thin enough reticle, but it stands out and it contrasts nicely. So here's 8 power, again looking at 200 yards to those trees. And the glass is excellent. I did not see significant darkening of the glass. As I back out here, it will get slightly brighter because that's just how it works with all optics. They're going to slightly get a little brighter towards the lower power, and they kind of tend to darken a little bit as you bring up magnification, but the darkening on this is not bad. Yeah, that looks really, really good. No tunneling issues. I do not see distortions in the edge of the glass. When I was looking out at 300 yards today, doing a little shooting there, just kind of holding and then looking towards the end. It's nice using 300 Blackout because I can shoot subs, and even only shooting 300, 330 yards in that neighborhood, I end up needing to hold quite a bit. So I can test out the reticle and I can test out the glass and get to the edges. But as I'm looking through here, it's just a really nice image. It's always going to be a little better towards the center. That just makes sense. But as I've been moving it around today, dialing and using holdovers, really happy with that reticle design. Let's talk about it a little bit. As you can see, you're going to have your 0, which for me is always going to be 100 yards if I can help it. And then you have 2 mils, 3 mils, 4 mils, and 5 mils, 6, 7, 8, 9. And, probably 9 is the most that most people would ever even use. But you could kind of figure out what to do there on a 10th line if you needed to, for holding over at more extreme ranges. Generally with 223, I think about 10 mils, and I think it's 800 yards. That's about the neighborhood, 10.3, 10.4, somewhere in there. So I can still hit targets. I suppose for a silhouette at 800 yards with my typical 75 or 69 grainers, I'd probably just put the 9 on the head and impact in the chest on a silhouette. So lots of functionality with that. Here's 8 power, that's 50 yards. So it's a little bit close to be on 8 power, but as you can see, identification of targets is very easy to do. I'm getting a lot of detail, just no chromatic aberration. I'm not seeing chromatic aberration on my end, guys. Looks very, very good. The whites are probably a little blown out just because of the sun and the direction, but as far as the actual quality of the glass, colors are looking great. Distortions are very minimal, if any. And I like that little ranging feature. I can do a lot with it, so that is set up for a little bit bigger targets. But what you would do, and I'll show you this in a little while, what you would do is start measuring your targets with that, and particularly more like a silhouette style target. All right, I did a couple of confirmation groups on paper to make sure my 0 was true, and I'm just running through some different loads to see how they do. With that 0, I think they're going to be generally close. Here's 100 yards on about 2.5 power. Oh yeah, it's on steel again. I'm just basically free recoiling this. So if I were to buy an optic, I would ask, who is the optic designed for? Who's going to get the most out of that optic? I want to know about that. I want to know about the intentionality before I make a judgment call about the optic and the way they designed it, because most of the time optics companies are a little bit smarter than people think they are, and they designed it for a particular use or purpose or type of person. And I think this is no different, but it's a very versatile optic. Again, 1 power to 8 power magnification. I think you could do about 1x per 100 yards. This review should have gone to 800 yards. I think there needs to be a part 2 just to show you how practical 8x actually is. I've shot 8x past 1,000 yards, guys. It definitely can do it. You can see your misses if you have the right kind of medium that you're shooting into, like sand or dirt. Grass can be difficult to spot for sure. But 1 to 8 power, it's very, very capable. So let's talk about like the competition shooters. Big 34 millimeter tube, wide field of view. Form factor is not terrible. It's not too long. It's not too heavy in my opinion, although I don't usually mind a little bit of weight. If I'm gonna have some weight in the optic, that's just fine. It usually means good things. So I'm gonna say with 1 to 8 power, being that it's a first focal plane, competition shooters, that's nice, because if you're like, man, I don't wanna zoom into 8 just to make the reticle make sense, and you're shooting at targets in some sort of 2-gun or 3-gun, at, let's say, out to 400 or 500 yards or 600 yards like I was today, the first focal plane has that advantage again of it doesn't matter if you're on 4 power or 8 power. And as I mentioned earlier today, shooting on 4 power, all the information was very, very clear. I have a lot of confidence that most people are not going to have any trouble seeing that reticle even at 4 power. So if you're trying to hit closer targets on 4 power and you don't want to mess around with touching the toggle on top or the mag ring, you could leave it right there and still engage your targets very, very far and see your data, and especially if you're shooting like I was today with IDPA targets. It's kind of windy. I needed a little bit bigger target to make those hits actually. I think this is a really good idea. Not having the 10 power, I know 1 to 10s are a very popular topic right now. I don't think it burned me. You know, at 8 power, parallax is not much of an issue, especially at this distance. The image was really nice and clear. And so I think competition shooters, people who need to shoot fast up close, and then suddenly, you know, in an instant, an extended range, I think this is a really nice package, particularly because the eye relief on this scope is good. It's very, very good. I've seen some better optics, but I'm still going to put this at a very high level of respect for the eye box that it has and accomplished on 8 power. That being said, if I'm shooting on 8 power, I'm steady, I'm rested, and I'm probably not running around, moving my face around. I'm probably out of the prone or resting on something or a barricade. And so I don't think that's as much of an issue as people make it out to be. I think very critically about that, and most of the time if I'm on higher power, it's to identify my target or I'm steady in the first place. So I'm going to say qualified, yes, for competition shooters in my opinion. Next, hunters. You know, 1 to 8 power, you can do a lot with that, and people think that they need really, really high power and magnification to identify targets. I just disagree. I don't think you do. Now, your eyesight might not be as good, and I'll just tell you, with 8 power, if you're only shooting out to 600 yards, you can identify a lot with a good, clear piece of glass. In the old days, with glass that wasn't as good, people generally thought you need more power, but you really can't see through that milky glass, and so they would increase power and magnification more and more and more. But you can get away with less magnification if the glass, the contrast, color fidelity, if all of that is very, very good and the optic has been designed well, which this one has been, you don't need as much power to shoot further or identify targets or objects. That's the case with this. This glass is very clean. It's very good. The edges of the reticle were very good. Down towards the bottom, I didn't think it was too bad at all, and I was using some more extreme holdovers and trying to get that reticle right down there. I was looking at the edges of the glass just for fun when I was taking out a bit further than 600 yards. I was not dialing and I was holding at the extreme edges, and I didn't see significant distortions. So I think hunters, if you're just using it to glass around and spot, and you're maybe putting this on some sort of AR platform, like a 450 Bushmaster, or there's just so many variants right now. Some of the bigger 6.5 AR-10s or a 308. I think this is really at home at one of those. In fact, I wish I had a 6.5 AR-10, so maybe Bear Creek Arsenal, maybe you can throw me one of those so I can actually put this to a proper test, because that 1:8 power with the clarity that it has, the trueness of the colors, I would be happy to take this past 1,000 yards. And the dialing, the consistency there, the tactileness of those turrets, it's pretty decent. I'm sure there are optics that can do better, but considering these are not exposed turrets, I think they're really, really good. I didn't mind dialing on these, and I'm sure the data wasn't 100% consistent, but I think it was really, really close, because what I noticed on my paper, I was only 0.2 off the last time I was shooting at this distance in a close temperature. And as you know, temperature changes data. So I think it's pretty trustworthy. I like the optic, I like the form factor, and I think hunters and competition shooters will get a lot out of it. And then guys like me, you know, I'm a little bit more towards the competition side than anything else. And I suppose defensive shooters, you know, 1:8, you can identify targets, you have a first focal plane, you don't have to worry about the stadia being off like a second focal plane would. I think a defensive use, this would make a lot of sense. The side illumination, the fact that it's a locking side illumination is very unique. You could just leave it unlocked if you were worried about that and needed to rapidly turn to a different number. You could run night vision. You could run it during the dusk or early morning times. The level 6 is just barely bright enough for me during daytime. I don't think it's going to be like desert bright or red dot bright, and I don't think they were shooting for that either in the development of that, because that's a pretty extreme expectation of an optic. But it's very functional, and I wouldn't complain about it. I think with those donuts and the way that they draw your eye to the center, defensive use is also something that you could definitely consider with this. And that's kind of why I have it on a 300 Blackout right now. This rifle is sort of in that vein for me. The price point is competitive. The build is very high quality. I would say this image, I think, is some of the highest quality glass and image that Shepard has put out. I'm very happy with the optic, and it's displaced the 1-10 that was on here. I'm going to stick with this one, partially because I really enjoy the reticle. The other part of it is the glass quality is very good. With that being said, guys, that's my opinion about the Shepard BRS 1:8. I'm really looking forward to seeing more Shepard optics on my channel. And in fact, I have another review coming up pretty soon. If this isn't exactly what you were looking for, there's probably something else that I have on my channel, maybe even from Shepard. And so click on one of these videos and check those out.